Welcome to this week's End of Days Update, coming to you from Tulsa, Oklahoma. We had a great time this last weekend in Texarkana, Texas. And if you're anywhere this weekend near Alabama, we'll be in Jasper, Alabama at Grace Family Church Sunday morning, Sunday night. And then Tuesday and Wednesday of that week, we'll be in Oakland, Iowa at Fellowship Church. So try to join us if you can. We'll have a great time. It's so cool to see people hungry for Jesus. And the Bible tells us, forsake not the assembling ourselves together, as some would do, especially as you see that day approaching. So that's what the End of Days Update is all about, is we can see that day approaching. We're looking at the things that point to the coming of the Lord, specifically the gathering of nations for the Ezekiel 38 war, because the rapture is signless, but the second coming has tons of signs. So you're watching the players literally come on the field right now for the Ezekiel 38 war. One thing after another each week happens that points to that. And we get into this because as you see the finish line, you run faster, not slower. The whole purpose of end-time preaching is to have an acceleration mentality because we have a short amount of time. Just like a football player, a quarterback with 2 minutes left, he needs to look at the play clock because it makes him alter how he does his plays. So when you see the clock ticking down for the coming of the Lord, you alter how you live your life. You're kinder, you're sweeter. I would hope you wouldn't go to bed going, you'd be nice to people because you're about to see Jesus face to face. So let's pick up what's happened this last week in Israel. Probably the big thing still is Turkey invading northern Syria and attacking the Kurds. That's kind of settled down a lot. I love and am surprised to see international leaders talk about with America pulling out. It basically showed Turkey exposed its thought pattern in NATO that it doesn't mind attacking other nations. So it really exposed their play. And if you looked at what's been happening in Turkey over the years, remember the Lord told me, watch Turkey right for the coming of the Lord. There's something about they will spur things on about bringing in their Messiah, which is the Antichrist. So you have all that happening, and then specifically this week is really intriguing to hear Israel's verbal thought pattern. Even Benjamin Netanyahu talked about Iran is preparing to have a missile attack on Israel, that Iran has missile batteries in Yemen that they could fire at Israel. Well, it was such a big deal for him to talk about that even their other minister of defense, because he's the acting defense minister now in Israel, talked about even how Israel has upped its game with its defense system. It's pretty crazy. Their Barak 8 ER missile defense system, listen to this, it will take out an aircraft at 90 kilometers or a missile at 90 kilometers or a drone at 90 kilometers. Whether it's high altitude or low altitude. So Israel's promoting their defense systems. They talked about their Arrow 2 and their Arrow 3, which goes above Earth's atmosphere. Then it talked about David's slingshot. Then they talked about the Patriot missile. So Israel went into great detail to talk about how they will shield themselves from these missiles. There really must be a ton of intel about Iran getting ready to strike Israel because it's all over the Israeli media. One thing after another, Iran's getting ready to strike Israel. Remember, we talked about 2 weeks ago how Iran had those planes landing in Beirut, unloading the artillery that was being altered to be precision-guided missiles. So you have that happening. You got natural things happening. You have an earthquake in the Philippines. You had an earthquake in Northern California with those wildfires. You had 100-mile-an-hour winds in Santa Rosa. Crazy, the fires that you have happening there. You have a cyclone in the Indian Ocean. They say breaking record, the strongest cyclone ever in history. A lot of things happening there. And even in Gaza this last couple of days, you had a drone that was released there. Israel sent F-15s in and took that drone out. So Israel right now is literally gearing up for an attack. Now, why is that a big deal? Because Iran says publicly they want to annihilate Israel. So you had the Arab states this week talk about they won't settle for any American policy for the Palestinians and the Jewish state, saying you've got to go back to the borders of the Six-Day War. Everything goes back to 1967. Well, Israel got that land because the nations around them tried to kill them, and Israel basically won that battle, and that's how those lines were drawn, and Jerusalem was won back. So you're seeing that come up again, and even stuff about the Temple Mount. There's a whole new press. Remember, Turkey's Erdogan said, we will take Muslims and we'll ascend to the Temple Mount and we'll take Jerusalem for Islam. And that's just not going to happen. But you hear that call over and over and over again. That really points me to Jesus is just about to come back, because those are things that happen during the tribulation. So all this stuff is going on with Russia being quiet, and then Israel being set up for Iran to attack, and Israel basically being ready for it. So, man, it wouldn't surprise me you'll wake up in the next few days or the next few months and see Damascus will be removed from being a city, because Isaiah 17 says that as well. So So this is why we get into this. Jesus said, he rebuked the Pharisees over and over and over again, but he only rebuked the crowd one time because they didn't know their hour of their visitation. So we look at all these things so that we can tell where we are in time. We always go back to Scripture. It's blatant, it's exact, it's precise. Jesus said, the generation that sees Israel made a nation and Jerusalem won back, he said that generation will not pass away till all is fulfilled. So people go, I don't like that. It doesn't matter. People say, I'm not comfortable with that. It still doesn't matter. Tag, you're it. So then you have the Hebrew language restored. You got the Ethiopian Jews brought back. One of those things I forgot about also is some linguist scientists tied the Hebrew language to being the original language before the Tower of Babel, because that's God's language. So the Hebrew language was restored to Israel in our lifetime. 100 years ago, no one spoke Hebrew. Now they all speak Hebrew. You got the fertility of the land of Israel. You've got the revival of the Roman Empire. You look at the Capitol building in Strasbourg, France. It's identical to the Tower of Babel. It is wild to see the Ethiopian Jews brought back. You've got all these different signs. I really like the tangible ones that are blatant lately. You had the fish showing up in the Dead Sea. Ezekiel prophesied 2,700 years ago about that. You had foxes show up on the Temple Mount about 6 weeks ago. Man, on the Jerusalem Post, they were right there. That's Lamentations 5:18, that the Temple Mount would be so desolate that foxes would show up. That was an indication to the rabbis that the third temple's getting ready to be rebuilt. It's interesting hearing the rabbis last week talk about Lebanon was going to be a helper in getting the temple rebuilt. So just all these little things put together shows you how close we are. So there's many, many more signs. Men will be lovers themselves. We have selfie sticks. You got the Temple Mount Institute that's ready to start having sacrifices. I mean, they're in position. This last year in the spring, they had a sacrifice on the edge when they dedicated the altar. Didn't get arrested. Last year they got arrested. This year they did not get arrested. You have red heifers born. You got many born all over the land now. So you have birds in position. 172 different species of predatory birds started showing up. So you got the cleanup crew in Israel. So you got fish showing up, birds showing up, foxes showing up. You got all the players in place for the Ezekiel 38 war. So we're watching the setup for Jesus to come back. And you go from all these signs and you got signals. You had blood red moons on Passover and Tabernacles. Pretty amazing to have 4 in a row on Passover and Tabernacles. NASA calls it a tetrad. When's the last time you had it like that? 1967. When Jerusalem was won back, 1948 when Israel was made a nation, 1492 at the Edict of Expulsion when the Jews were kicked out of Spain. So you got the heavens signaling that, then you had the Bethlehem Star this last year, pretty amazing, first time in 2,000 years. Then you had Mercury do a flyby of the sun, happens 5 times in a century. When the sun went down directly over the Temple Mount, the coordinates for the Temple Mount, Orion changed his instrument to hammer. The planets formed a sickle, the moon formed a sickle. You had hammer and sickle on the same day. That's Russia's symbol. So you got tangible physical signs that Jesus is just about to come back. Wow. So we have a lot to do in a short period of time. I hear people get mad at me when I say this. I believe we have more time, but not much. So with that thought pattern, he's telling us all these things because he loves us so much. He wants you happy. He wants you blessed. He wants you energized. Your strength will be tied to your joy, and you can't get much cooler than knowing you're going to see Jesus face to face so soon. So listen, help your local church, help your local pastor, get the message out, be engaged. This is not the time to chill out. This is the time to be all in because the King is about to come back. Wow, we're about to see his eyes as a flame of fire, feet like unto fine brass, voice of many waters. He overcame death, hell, and the grave for you, died for you, and was raised from the dead, and he's just about to come back. Wow, the earth and nature's getting ready for the entrance of the King. Hey, have a blessed, awesome week. Join us if you can in Jasper, Alabama, and join us if you can in Oakland, Iowa. Have a great time. Have a blessed week. We'll see you next Wednesday.
Thanks for joining us today at the End of Days Update. If you'd like to be notified every time there's a new post, just go to the EDU at josephmorris.com and subscribe to receive email alerts. If these posts and updates have been a blessing to you, please consider making a one-time donation to help get the message out, or even becoming a monthly partner with Joseph Morris Ministries. Thanks again for tuning in to the EDU, and we'll see you next week.